What if I told you that in the heart of 17th century Africa, a queen, yes, a black queen, outwitted, outfought, and outnegotiated one of the most powerful empires in Europe? Her name was Queen Nzinga. She turned diplomacy into warfare, made enemies into allies, and forced colonizers to call her equal. And yet, you've probably never heard her name. This is the story of the African queen who defeated a European empire. Stay with us, because by the end of this video you won't just know her name, you'll remember it forever. Queen Nzinga was born around 1582 in the Kingdom of Ndongo, in what is now Angola. Her father was Angola Kiluanji Samba, the ruler of Ndongo, and from a young age, Nzinga was immersed in the brutal realities of power, politics, and survival. Unlike many girls of her time, Nzinga was trained as a diplomat and a warrior. She spoke fluent Portuguese, understood European customs, and was trained in the art of negotiation. But her education wasn't just academic, it was strategic. Her people were under threat. The Portuguese had set their sights on Angola as a key port in the transatlantic slave trade. Thousands of Ndongo people were being captured, sold, and shipped across the Atlantic. Nzinga's family was fractured by political chaos, and as her brothers vied for power, she watched the old world collapse. But she didn't wait for history to happen to her. She decided to shape it. In 1622, Nzinga traveled to Luanda to negotiate with the Portuguese governor, João Correia de Sousa. She came not as a supplicant but as a sovereign, but the governor had a trick planned. In a symbolic move, he offered her no chair, hoping to demonstrate Portuguese superiority. Many rulers would have stood in humiliation or left in protest. Nzinga did neither. She looked around, motioned to her servant, and made him her chair. With her head held high and her back straight, she stared the governor directly in the eyes and conducted the negotiations from a position of power. That moment became legend. A woman in a foreign court, surrounded by enemies, asserting that she was not to be underestimated. The treaty they signed offered temporary peace, and for a while it seemed Nzinga had secured stability. But peace with empires is never what it seems. Only a few years after the treaty, the Portuguese broke their promises. They installed a puppet ruler in Ndongo, and Nzinga, seen as a threat, was pushed out. She fled with a small band of loyalists into the interior. But she was not retreating. She was regrouping. In the depths of the forest, Nzinga aligned with the Mbangala, fierce mercenary warriors known for their brutality and ritual warfare. These warriors had no allegiance to kingdoms or crowns, but they respected strength. Nzinga married one of their war leaders and adopted their customs, not as submission, but as strategy. She gained their loyalty and command. In time, she would make them a cornerstone of her power. By 1631, Nzinga had conquered the nearby kingdom of Matamba. She made it her capital. From exile, she had now become the ruler of two kingdoms. Nzinga didn't just rule, she built. Matamba became a military stronghold and a political haven for escaped slaves, refugees, and exiles from across the region. She centralized the state, reformed the economy, and used trade, yes, even in slaves, to maintain leverage over both African and European powers. Her rule was complex, controversial, and unapologetically strategic. To some, she was a liberator, to others, a warlord. But above all, she was in control. She corresponded with the Pope, hosted missionaries, balanced between traditional religion and Catholicism to keep European alliances on edge. Nzinga's court was multicultural, multilingual, and militarized. Her army included women, former captives, and hardened warriors. And she never let her enemies forget. She had survived exile, she had returned, and she wasn't leaving. In 1641, the Dutch captured Luanda from the Portuguese. Nzinga saw her moment. She allied with them, hoping to push the Portuguese out of Angola entirely. With Dutch cannons and her own hardened troops, Nzinga launched a campaign against the Portuguese forces. In 1647, the Battle of Combi became her greatest military triumph. Portuguese forces suffered massive casualties. Nzinga had not only outlasted her enemies, she had defeated them. But victory is rarely final. When Portugal retook Luanda in 1648, the Dutch withdrew. Nzinga was left to fight alone, again, and she did. She continued resistance using guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and diplomacy. She never stopped pressing for freedom, not just for herself, but for her people. By the 1650s, Nzinga was in her 70s, but still unbroken, and finally, the Portuguese relented. In 1657, they signed a treaty that acknowledged Nzinga as queen of both Ndongo and Matamba. In return, she allowed Christian missionaries, supported some slave trade under new rules, and agreed to a peace that ensured her sovereignty. It was not submission, it was survival, and it marked the first time a European empire recognized an African queen as a legitimate and equal sovereign. She had forced Europe to respect her, and she did it all on her own terms. Nzinga ruled until her death in 1663 at nearly 80 years old. She had reigned for over 4 decades, through war, betrayal, exile, and revolution. She left behind not just a kingdom, but a legend. In Brazil, Cuba, and Haiti, descendants of those taken in the slave trade carried her memory. In Angola, she became a national hero. In 2013, a statue of Nzinga was erected in Luanda. Her story speaks to power, resistance, strategy, and the strength of a woman who refused to kneel, no matter the cost. Queen Nzinga wasn't just a ruler. She was a strategist, a fighter, a survivor, a legend, and now, it's time her name echoes through history. If you learned something today, share this video. Let her story be heard in classrooms, on timelines, in the places history forgot. Subscribe to the Grand Continuum. Drop a comment below. Which untold stories should we uncover next? Because this was history you never learned.